What's up, boys and girls? Londrick here, and now I'm back with Wrestling 1992 Q&A. So this is I think the third Q&A of a certain year, and this one's personally just for me because 1992 is the year I started watching wrestling. So I've just got my personal one out of the way. Notice I didn't get as many questions this time, so I guess that the message I get there is maybe you guys aren't interested in all the stuff, so let me know if that's the case. But I think because of this reaction I'll probably go from the Attitude Era onwards from now on. Probably won't do many older ones now, because obviously I look at this one, I look at the 97 and I look at the 2002 one, and those ones got far more responses than this one. So let's get to it. Really, I'm sure you know how this works by now. The questions are sent and I just give the answers. That simple Q&A. So let's get to them really. The first set of questions come from Stephen Taylor, in brackets, howdy Lundrick. Howdy Stephen Taylor. First one, should Ron Simmons main event a Starrcade? Not really. I mean, let's just assume they got rid of that stupid Battle Bowl and just had a normal card. I'll say if any match in that card should have main evented, it should have been Sting versus Vader in the King of the Cables tournament final. I mean, let's be honest, Ron Simmons was kind of like a mid-card holding the world title, wasn't he? He wasn't really a credible world champion. Certainly wasn't a Sting or a Vader, so I can't remember. I think, did he wrestle Rude on that show? I think he wrestled Rick Rude in that Starrcade. I can't remember. But if I can't truly remember, that couldn't have been that memorable, really, could it? So I would if I had to do that show, it would be Sting and Vader going on last, and then who was better in this year and why? Sting or Bret Hart? Tough question. Possibly Bison coming in, but I'll go with Bret Hart. I mean, both had an awesome year, and this question's coming up later, but these are definitely my top two wrestlers of 1992. I feel like the progress Bret made was better. I mean, you look at that, you look at some of the matches he had. He had awesome Intercontinental title match with Piper at WrestleMania 8. During the summer, a great ladder match with Shawn. Had one of the best matches of his career with Davey Boy at SummerSlam. Awesome match with Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series. Sting was probably the biggest star in 1992, I'll admit that, because this was the year Bret became a main eventer, where Sting was the undisputed man in WCW. But for me, I'll go for the Hitman. Did Royal Rumble make Ric Flair's legendary status go higher than it already was? Yeah, I think so. And I'll probably say his whole WWF run made his legendary status higher. I mean, thing is, whether you like it or not, WWF, WWE is the place to be. It's the place to make your career. I mean, all the Flair's previous stuff were in Jim Crockett's promotions, in the NWA, in early WCW, but make no mistake, the WWF is the place to be. And then Flair got there in 1992, had that epic moment of winning the 1992 Royal Rumble, becoming the World Wrestling Federation champion, had his first WrestleMania match with the Macho Man Randy Savage. So yeah, and Flair's run kind of reminds me of AJ Styles, but to a higher extent. I mean, AJ had been a star everywhere, TNA, New Japan and all that, but became a WWE and became a superstar, so kind of reminds me of that. And what do we have now? Thoughts on the Warrior in 1992? It was fine. Honestly, I think it's a reflection of the company though. I don't think it was anywhere near as hot as he'd been from, say, 88 to 90, 91, maybe, not so much 91, but his absolute hottest run. I mean, he came back, had a fairly lame feud with Papa Shango, if people remember that. Match with Savage at WrestleMania, not WrestleMania, fuck. SummerSlam 1992 was good, and then obviously Ultimate Maniacs, and he left, so he's only really round for, I think, 7 months this time. Yeah, And it obviously just wasn't the same, I don't think, after he came back from his 1991 suspension. Hogan had gone, the company was changing and all that, so yeah, not that good. Then what have we got? It was 1992 Western Mortician Undertaker's best in-ring year. I say probably by default. Not saying this was good by any means, but better than 1993 and 1991. So yeah, I mean, he had two good matches that year. One in January MSG with Brett, and then a little known WWF title match in like September 1992. It was on a home video, Undertaker versus Ric Flair for the world title. You should definitely seek that match out if you haven't seen it. Then we got next set of questions. Diesel 101 Raw. What would the WWE be like if Sid Justice never left the WWE and became the face of the company? Well, the problem with that is you couldn't really have Sid as the face of the company, because if you remember at the time, this was the feds were on Vince's arse for steroids and all that. The steroid scandal was breaking out. So if you've got a steroid scandal, can you really have a guy that looks like Sid be the face of the company? I mean, let's be honest, Sid was probably on steroids at this time. Probably, I'll say probably was, yeah. I mean, if Hogan had to go away because of it, and the Warrior came back noticeably smaller, you can't really have Sid as a face of your company, can you? But if everything was fine, and if he was, would the WWF really doing any better? I don't think so. I think the company had peaked anyway by that point, and a downturn in business was probably inevitable. So I don't think he would have drawn any more than the likes of Savage and Flair and Brett would have done. As far as match wise, I suppose him and Flair could have been kind of interesting, I guess. Maybe Sid and the Warrior could have been a big feud. So yeah, I honestly don't think it would have made that much of a difference. So next questions, and this one's asked twice, so I look through the questions. So, but this is the first one I've come across, so I'll answer this one, and then when I get the next one, I'll just quickly repeat what I said before. Top 5 wrestlers of 1992. Now, yeah, this is a pretty good one actually. So let's do it in reverse. So I'll say reverse order. Have a thing here. Well, so we'll have number 5, Macho Man Randy Savage. I mean, granted he wasn't the Macho Man that he used to be, you could say, but he was still pretty awesome. I mean, started out the year, ended the feud of Jake the Snake Roberts, won his second WWF title in a great match with Ric Flair at WrestleMania. Actually had a fairly underrated title run at the time, honestly, the title run he had in the summer months in 1992, because that was obviously the time of transition, the time Hogan left the company, and they were building to a new generation of which ended up being Brett later that year. So Savage was a great veteran champion at the time. Dragged a good match out, Warrior at SummerSlam. Savage and Perfect versus Flair and Razor Survivor Series was pretty good, so that one. Then number 4, you got to go with Ric Flair. I mean, again, like Savage, wasn't Ric Flair his peak, but still an awesome version of Ric Flair. I mean, overall, I'll say he had a great year. Obviously, highlight being that epic 1992 Royal Rumble performance where he won the World Wrestling Federation title. Then had his first WrestleMania match, losing the belt to Savage. Had some good matches for a lot of people, including one where he dropped the belt to Brett in October. Yeah, so he was still one of the top guys in the WWF at the time. Number 3, Ravishing Rick Rude. What an awesome year for Rick Rude. This was 1992. He was probably the best heel in the entire business, in my opinion. Amazing promos. Great matches, great US title run. He was US champion for most of 1992, if I recall. Most notably having an awesome feud with Ricky Steamboat for most of that year. Part of the Dangerous Alliance. Really standout year. I mean, it's a shame that Rude wasn't in the WWF in 1992, because I feel like if Hogan and leaving and all that, and likes of Savage and being phased out, Rude could have been one of the top guys in the WWF that year. But of course, steroid scandal, you can't really have a guy like Rick Rude, can you? Then top 2, I've got to go Sting as number 2. I'll admit probably the best wrestler in WCW was the man that year. Won the world title from Lex Luger with Super Brawl. I had a couple of matches with Rick Rude that I remember being really good. Notably won a Clash of the Champions in I think it was January, I think. Then tremendous feud with Vader, great matches with Cactus Jack. Sting was the man for WCW in 1992. With Flair out the picture completely, Lex Luger had left the company that year, so WCW really was Sting's to carry then. The number 1, I'd say Bret the Hitman Hart, awesome year. Started off as the Intercontinental Champion, lost that title to the Mount. He won it back in a career-defining victory over Rowdy Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 8. Matches with Shawn Michaels over the summer were great. A particularly nice gem in July, Bret Hart and Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels. Then obviously lost the Intercontinental title to the British Bulldog, one of the best matches of all time at SummerSlam. Went to rebound 6 weeks later and defeat Ric Flair to become the WWF champion in Saskatoon. Oh yeah, it was in Saskatoon, wasn't it? Yeah. And then, yeah, so awesome stuff. And then rounded off the year with a great match with Shawn Michaels at the Survivor Series. So definitely going to have to go for the Hitman on this one. Now, this is a good question, and this has been asked twice as well. So, who had the better product, WWF or WCW? Now, this is a really tough one to answer, because if I was looking at it through the eyes of a 5-6-year-old that I was watching at the time, I'd always say the WWF, because WWF in 1992 was kind of special in my heart for me. Loved it, because that's when I started watching wrestling, all that. But looking back now as an adult, do I have to think to myself, is that really true? I mean, if I have to be completely honest with myself, I would have to be honest and reluctantly say WCW was probably the better product. I mean, look at the level of talent they had that year. I mean, Sting, Vader, Rude, Steamboat, Dustin Rhodes, Stunning Steve Austin, Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, Brian Pillman, the Steiners were still there. And the level of pay-per-views he had, I mean, holy crap. Super Brawl was fucking outstanding. Wrestle War was great overall. I mean, not the best undercard, but a great top of the card. Beach Blast was phenomenal. That was fantastic pay-per-view. Then you had good clashes that year as well. Great feuds such as Sting versus Vader. Flair versus... No, not Flair, fuck me. Rude versus Steamboat. Pillman versus Liger. Steiners versus Gordy and Williams. I mean, I'm going to go into more detail later on, because that is actually one of the questions about the Bill Watts era, but I really did like Bill Watts' era of WCW, so have to reluctantly admit that WCW was probably the better show than the WWF at the time. And what have we got? If Hogan and Flair had happened, what would the buy rate have been, and would it have been on the level of the Hogan match of Andre 3, Savage 3, or Warrior 6? Now that's 2 questions in one. Now, if Flair and Hogan happened, I think the buy rate would have been excellent. I mean, as far as percentage wise, I couldn't have touched Hogan Andre. I mean, Hogan Andre was a 10% buy rate, but as far as numbers, it would have been better. I would probably say it would not be quite as good as the Hogan Savage at WrestleMania 5, but be better than Hogan and Warrior at WrestleMania 6. So if I had to guess, I would say somewhere in between 650 to 750, in that sort of range. So as far as the match, I honestly feel that could have been one of the best matches of Hogan's career. I mean, yet Hogan and Ric Flair. Ric Flair was still one of the best. Maybe he wasn't the best wrestler in the world anymore, but he was definitely one of the best wrestlers in the world. And I think this is a dream match that would have happened. I think both would have been motivated to make it as special as they could. I mean, they had some matches on house shows in late 1991, and those are actually pretty good matches, but they only go like 10-11 minutes. So say they have like a 17-18 minute match on pay-per-view, I feel like it would have been awesome. At least a 4-star match, maybe higher. I really do think it would have been at least on par with Hogan and Savage at WrestleMania 5 is in terms of a match. So yeah, really. So now last question. If your fairy godparents grant you a wish for this year, which one would it be? Hogan versus Flair at WrestleMania and you get a front row ticket at WrestleMania, or a front row ticket to Bret versus Bulldog? Much I would love Hogan and Flair, I'd have to go with Bret Bulldog. If I had to pick, I mean, I can't really lose either way, can I really? Because that's two phenomenal options, but it would have to be for Bret and the Bulldog, honestly. Just in Wembley, in the UK, that classic match. Now, next set of questions. Hitman fan 6831. Well, no, 683, sorry. What was it like watching wrestling at the time? Airtimes, memory, etc. So, this was 1992, way before the days of the internet and going to the IWC and getting results and all that. Yeah, it was fucking awesome. I mean, WF was so hot in popularity at the time. I'd never quite seen this thing called professional wrestling before. It was fucking awesome. I mean, yeah, obviously looking back, some of the storylines were cheesy as hell, but I was a kid. I didn't really care about that then. Remember, this was before Raw, and being the UK, this was Saturday and Sunday mornings, so I was mainly watching wrestling challenging superstars. But I'm not sure because the memory's faded because it was 25 years ago. Don't think primetime wrestling aired in the UK. I think they just showed certain clips on like challenging superstars. And I say that because I vividly remember seeing do you remember when Mr. Perfect turned on Bobby Heenan on primetime to a team of Randy Savage Survivor Series where he poured the pitcher of water all over Bobby Heenan? I vividly remember that, and I vividly remember seeing Jerry Lawler's WWE debut, which took place on primetime wrestling as well. So, there's only 4 pay-per-views as well, so, whereas now we have 2 pay-per-views a month. I was a wrestling fan for a good 3 months before SummerSlam took place. Then after that, I was another 3 months before Survivor Series took place. Guys I liked, I remember vividly, top 3 guys when I first started watching were Bret Hart, the British Bulldog, Macho Man Randy Savage, which is kind of weird because 2 of them are dead now, which is just sad. But I also like Legion of Doom. I like the Big Boss Man. I like The Undertaker, but he wasn't one of my favourite wrestlers. That's it. I think I said LOD, didn't I? Was kind of a fan of the Natural Disasters as well for some strange reason. Obviously favourite stuff that I remember. Obviously the build up in the SummerSlam was epic at the time for me anyway. Really loved that. One of my favourite things actually was actually the Bossman and Nails feud. I mean, and I make no apologies about that. I thought that feud was awesome at the time. Like, granted the matches were the absolute shit the bed shits, but the feud actually made a ton of sense. Bossman was a prison guard, and then Nails was an ex-convict coming out of prison to fight the Big Boss Man who had apparently abused his power in jail and beaten Nails a few times. I remember that one. I can't remember what show it was, but it would have been either Superstars or Challenge, surely. Bossman was in a match with some random guy. Bossman beat him. And then this fucking crazy guy comes out in an orange boiler suit and then just beats the shit out of Nails. And I remember them showing like pictures of the Big Bossman on TV, like with a battered and bruised face, which was pretty weird at the time. Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, I remember, oh god, one of the first things I actually watched, which looking back now is absolutely ridiculous, but one of the first things I was exposed to, during the Warrior Papa Shango feud, well, a lot of you won't, but so the crack was Warrior's feud with Papa Shango. Papa Shango's a voodoo man, and he put a curse on the Ultimate Warrior. That's right. In 1992 cartoon professional wrestling world, a man puts a curse on another man. So 2 instances occurred for this one. There was Warrior was doing an interview with Mean Gene. This was back when they had promos on the podium in the arena at the time. Then all of a sudden his face paint just started running down his face, and then A more famous one, which, sure, if you hadn't seen it at the time, you've probably seen it since. Warrior was, I think he was just wrestling a jobber on TV, I think. Then all of a sudden, he started getting stomach cramps in the ring. Then they took him backstage, and the Warrior just fucking puked all over the doctors and the staff and stuff. It was really fucking weird. Then obviously watching SummerSlam, I didn't watch it live because Peter was live in the UK at the time. It had to be. So I'm thinking of the time frame. That must have been the 6 weeks holiday from school because it was August, wasn't it? So back then, pay-per-views would air on like a midweek afternoon. So whatever day it actually aired in the UK, I can't even remember what day it aired in the UK. But I remember watching that. That was fucking awesome. I remember also I thought this Rick Martel and Shawn Michaels feud was hilarious, where Sherry made them not punch each other in the face. Then Sherry would pretend to faint and all that crap. That was fucking. And another feud I always thought was hilarious. I used to think it was hilarious. Do you remember the Undertaker was feuding with Kamala, and the Kamala was scared of the Undertaker and he kept running away from him. I thought that was amusing shit anyway. And then how he introduced the wrestling. Now I can't remember, but as the story goes, one day in 1992 as a kid, because back then I used to watch like action cartoons such as the Thundercats. What's the Thundercats? Look it up, kids. And I'm not talking about the shitty 2011 version either. I'm talking about the original Thundercats, the greatest children's cartoon of all time. There, I said it. And stuff like He-Man and stuff like that. So I guess my dad borrowed a tape of wrestling from someone at work, brought that home for me, and that was it. Now, to this day, I have no idea what the videotape was, or any of the matches on the videotape, but that's the story that my mother tells me, so that's how it got started. Dad brought home a tape of wrestling to show me, and that was it. I think he probably looks back and thinks, what a terrible parent I was, introducing my son to this crap. I bet he's thinking, nah, he'll probably grow out of this when he gets to like 10, 11. Then not realising he now has a 30-year-old son who still watches wrestling and talks about wrestling on YouTube. She was somewhere in the back of the mind, he wonders where the hell he went wrong as a parent. But that's another issue. Then yeah, I think it escalated from there really. I mean, then we found out that WWF was on Sky TV, so just started watching and never grew out of it 25 years later. I mean, to this day I wish I knew what the videotape was, because honestly I have no idea what the hell it was. So what have we got? Wait, hang on. Best / worst WWE / WCW pay-per-view. So we'll go WWF first. Best pay-per-view, probably go for WrestleMania 8. I mean, there was only 4 of them, and WrestleMania 8 was probably the best. I mean, you had 2 classic matches in Savage and Flair and Bret and Piper, but then you also had Shawn Michaels' first singles WrestleMania match. You also had The Undertaker squashing Jake the Snake Roberts, a Legion of Doom return, and stuff like that. So, and then as far as worst, out of the 4, I'd probably say Survivor Series was the worst. I mean, yeah, overall that wasn't really good pay-per-view. I mean, you had 2 good matches on here. Savage and Flair versus, Savage and fucking Perfect versus Flair and Razor Ramon. Also the main event of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, but then you had stuff like Bossman and Nails in a nice stick match. Undertaker Kamala casket match wasn't very good. Tatanka Rick Martel was like a mid-card match. Yokozuna squashed Virgil, so not that good at all. Then we got, as far as WCW now, this is a hard one, because I had to narrow it down to 2. And either of these could be number 1, but it's down to Super Brawl and Beach Blast. 2 amazing pay-per-views, but for me personally, I'll go with Beach Blast as the best. For that was a fucking tremendous pay-per-view, it really was. I mean, you had Brian Pillman versus Scottish Flamingo in a really good opener. Sting and Cactus Jack had an awesome Falls Count Anywhere match. Ricky Steamboat and Rick Rude had a fantastic 30-minute Iron Man match. What else was the? Our main event was Steiners versus Gordy and Williams, and I believe that was a 30-minute draw. I'm pretty sure it was. It was either that one or one of the clashes. They had a 30-minute draw, but what a fantastic show. And for worst, I think. I guess Starcade wasn't. I don't know. Actually, I suppose Halloween Havoc then, because Starcade did have 2 excellent matches. Halloween Havoc 1992 wasn't that good. I mean, you had Sting and Jacob Roberts in a coal miner's glove match. Ron Simmons versus the Barbarian, which was I can't even remember most of the card. I think Vader fought Nikita Koloff. Steamboat and Brian Pillman was pretty good, but yeah. So I'll probably go Halloween Havoc as the worst. Well, then we've got, what have we got? Better promotion WWE, WCW. I answered that one earlier. I'll say WCW. And then, what was the first match you remember seeing? Now, this wasn't the first match I saw, obviously, but it's the first thing I remember. And I've told this story to a few people before, so a lot of people watching the video will be familiar with this, but I'll tell it again for the benefit of those who haven't seen it. Now, first thing I remember about wrestling, and I know how ridiculous this sounds, but it's absolutely true. It was a match between The Undertaker and the Berserker. But the match isn't really what I remember. What I remember about the match is, after the match, Undertaker was down. I think Berserker must have attacked him after the bell or something like that. Then, obviously, the Berserker was a Viking, so what do Vikings have? They have big swords. So what the Berserker was going to do, he was going to take the sword and he was going to stab the Undertaker with it. And I remember Berserker going to stab the Undertaker and the Undertaker rolling out of the way. Now, that's a pretty hilarious first memory, isn't it? Really. So yeah, so that's your set of questions done with. Now, who have we got next? We have King of Wrestling 98. Most underrated match, so most underrated match of the year. Probably go with, I'll probably say Rick Rude, Ricky Steamboat match at Super Brawl. I mean, only really because the Beach Blast match was so awesome. This match really gets overlooked, and then obviously the Super Brawl 1992 was an awesome pay-per-view, so maybe that also got overshadowed by the Pillman Liger match. But I would say this was an awesome match in its own right, really. It was for the US title. It was a great match. Great 4-star match. And we got most overrated match. Honestly, I'll probably say the most overrated match. I always thought the Savage Warrior match at Wrestle... No, fucking hell, not again. It's SummerSlam was a fairly overrated match. I mean, I thought it was a very good match, no doubt about it, but don't think it was a great match. I mean, I've seen people give it like 4.25, 4.5 stars, but I go for like think of it more as a 3.5 star match. So I'll probably say that one for the most overrated match. Then what have we got? Fought on the Brian Pillman versus Jushin Liger Super Brawl. I mean, fuck me, what a match that was. If it wasn't for Brett versus Owen at WrestleMania 10, this would be the best opening match in the history of wrestling pay-per-view. So this is a good number 2 for that one, really. Fucking awesome match, I mean. Especially for the time, I mean. Looking at it now, in 2017 eyes, it's nothing special, really. I mean, if you compare it to what the guys are doing today, this is fairly standard stuff, really. But you got to look at it from the eyes of 1992, and a lot of this stuff was brand new to the mainstream USA audience. I mean, this was really amazing high-flying stuff at the time. I mean, with guys like Liger and the Great Muta had come into WCW, they'd given the US audience shit they hadn't seen before. I mean, a lot of these stuff were coming off the Liger at the time. Fucking hell, it's kind of amazing to think Jushin Liger is still wrestling in New Japan today, and even wrestled in the Best of the Juniors this year. And this is 25 years ago, and he's still fucking going. I mean, most of the guys that came up in Liger's era are now either dead or well, long retired, and Liger's still going. What a fucking beast. He even wrestled a takeover a couple of years ago, which is awesome. And at the time, Brian Pillman, it's kind of funny now looking at Brian Pillman was a light heavyweight in 1992, when he was at least 220, possibly even 230 at the time. It just shows how much times have changed in attitudes towards like cruiserweights, light heavyweights and all that. Whereas if Pillman came today, he'd be a heavyweight for sure. I mean, obviously WWE has the 205 limit now, so most cruiserweights now are in between 170 and 200 pounds. So that's just kind of a funny observation of how much wrestling's changed over the years. I mean, Psychology was point on some great spots. Crowd fucking loved it. Amazing match. One of the best matches in 1992. I'll give it 4 3/4 stars. One of the best matches WCW ever put on, quite frankly, especially in the 1990s. Then we got your reaction when Randy Savage and Elizabeth reunited at WrestleMania. That was 1991, not 1992. So let's just move on from there. Then we got next set of questions. We Are Pro Wrestling. If SummerSlam 1992 had taken place in Washington DC instead of England, what do you think Bulldog would have done, if anything? As it would have been Brett versus HBK for the IC title. So you're right about that. I mean, the decision was fairly late. I don't think the decision was made till like June, but at the time SummerSlam was going to be in either one or two locations. It's going to go to capital city Washington DC, or they're going to take advantage of the huge popularity in England and go to Wembley. They went to Wembley, and then because at the time it was probably going to be Brett and Shawn for the Intercontinental title. I mean, Brett had been told when he won the title at WrestleMania that he was, all likelihood, he was going to end up dropping the title at SummerSlam. And obviously Shawn Michaels was a big up and coming heel at the time, so and him and Brett had wrestled various house show and Coliseum video matches in between WrestleMania and SummerSlam, so Shawn was a perfect fit. As a matter of fact, Brett had the idea that it was going to be Washington DC. He was going to pitch the ladder match to Vince, the first ever ladder match in WWE history. Or, well, obviously it was in England, wouldn't have made sense for him to put Davey Boy over, which is what happened. So it would have been awesome to see Brett and Shawn have that ladder match at SummerSlam. And then what would the Bulldog have done? I mean, he'd probably been on the card, I would imagine. But obviously, if it'd been in America, he wouldn't have done anything significant. Because look at the other stars of the company, I mean. So I guess you would have put him with either probably a Repo Man or a Berserker or a Papa Shango or something like that. And possibly Rick Martel, because I suppose, yeah, maybe Rick Martel, because if you think about it, if Brett and Shawn wouldn't have happened, Shawn wouldn't have wrestled Martel, Martel wouldn't have had an opponent, Davey Boy wouldn't have had an opponent, and it would have been a solid mid-card match. So yeah, let's go for Rick Martel in that case. Then we go, how underrated do you think Savage Warriors in SummerSlam 1992 was? Not underrated at all for me. If anything, I think it's a bit overrated. I mean, I just don't think it was that. I don't think it was a great match. I think it was a very good match, but certainly nowhere near the standard of the WrestleMania 7 match was, or anything like that. I mean, I think a lot of people give it like 4 1/4, 4 1/2, but like I said earlier in the video, I see it as more of a 3 1/2 star match. So I don't think it was underrated at all, to be honest with you. Then what have we got? Thoughts on the Randy Savage Shawn Michaels match from UK Rampage. Wow, yeah, that's a cool as fuck match. It's yeah, so obviously back then, before like UK pay-per-views and that, we'd get UK special shows from time to time, usually once a year, and I think it would be on live on Sky or something like that. Obviously this was right before I started watching wrestling, so never saw this match at the time. I probably didn't see it till about, I want to say like 2000. When did the Savage DVD come out? So I bet you I didn't see this match till like 2009. So all these years later, honestly, I bet you hadn't seen that match till then. But yeah, that was a really great gem actually. I mean, on paper it's like you got two of the greatest of all time. Although sadly, it would have been nice to see that match in the prime, like Randy Savage in his prime versus Shawn Michaels in his prime. But Savage was slightly past his prime, and Shawn Michaels had yet to hit his prime. So it was a great match, but for sure, not a classic match or anything. But I would definitely say a 4-star match. I would say one of Shawn Michaels, probably was Shawn Michaels' first great singles match in his career after he turned heel in January. I mean, he had a couple of good matches in that time, but I don't think he had an excellent match. I mean, Savage had just become the US champion a couple of weeks earlier at WrestleMania 8. So Savage was having a nice title reign, and it was just nice to see the older Savage against the younger Shawn Michaels. There's a nice little dynamic there. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe this was the last match Miss Elizabeth ever accompanied Randy Savage to the ring in the WWF. I think that's the case, but yeah, I say great 4-star match. Anyway, better WWF champion, Ric Flair, Randy Savage. Probably go with Savage for that one. Two pretty good champions, but I don't think they were neither an outstanding champion or anything. I feel like Flair obviously had the belt twice from Royal Rumble to WrestleMania. I don't even remember making a televised title defense in that time. He might have done, obviously he had plenty on house shows and that, but as far as TV and that goes, I don't think he had a single title. And again, he won it in September, then lost the belt to Bret in October, so not really enough time to establish himself as a champion. You only held the title to get off Savage and give Bret a heel to beat. So I feel Savage, it was a weird time because obviously after WrestleMania, Hogan had left the company for a while. Warrior was back, the likes of Sid left, Jake left. It was definitely a transition into the new generation, so I feel like putting the belt on Savage was like giving the belt a safe pair of hands, if that makes sense. But I feel like Savage, he did a very good job holding the title at a time when they needed a safe pair of hands to hold the belt. I mean, obviously had that defense against Shawn, feud with Ric Flair and all that, match of the Warrior at SummerSlam and all that. So I'll probably go Savage for that one. And last question here. Thoughts on the Bret Hart WCW rule from January 1992. So, for the benefit of those who don't know, because some people might be watching it and thinking, what Bret Hart WCW rule? So I'll briefly explain it. So, the rumour was, going around for years, that Bret Hart was toying with the idea of leaving the WWF for WCW. His contract was supposedly coming up in early 1992. Supposedly he'd given his notice, and then the crack was he was going to debut at that January Clash of the Champions, and that's why Bret lost the title to the Mountie prior to Royal Rumble 1992. And that had been the rumour going around for years. Now, Bret's side of the story, which I got from a kayfabe commentaries interview, it's kind of strange how he doesn't mention this at all in his book. I mean, he mentioned the rumour about going to WCW 89, but he doesn't mention it here. So, when he was back home for the holidays, he was talking to Brian Pillman, who was in WCW, and Pillman had told Bret that about the deal Brian had in WCW, and it turned out that Brian Pillman was making more in WCW than Bret was in the WWF. Now, back then, guys were on year rolling contracts, so like, if you didn't want your contract to roll over, you'd hand your notice in. But if you did, you didn't set out on your contract automatically roll over for another year. So what you had to do then was give a period of notice, about 60 or 90 days, I think, and then that's how it would have went. So, but Bret actually made the mistake. Bret thought his contract was rolling over, but Bret made the mistake and didn't realise that his contract had already rolling over, so it couldn't happen. So, what if it had happened? What if Bret had gone to WCW in January 1992? That would have been, wow. I think wrestling would have been quite different, really. I mean, because even then, Vince was looking for a new star, and you got to think about it like this. It was a steroid scandal, so anyone who looked like they were on steroids was out of the question. So Vince made the conscious decision to go with a smaller, athletic type wrestler. And obviously, and Bret Hart was the guy in the right place at the right time. He'd been around for a while, proven himself at tag team level, proven himself at intercontinental level, was hugely popular internationally. So if it wasn't Bret, who would have been the guy who Vince put the title on in late 1992 to drive this new generation thing? I mean, I suppose the obvious option would be The Undertaker, but the problem was, this was The Undertaker, Western mortician, stalker, zombie type gimmick, so that Undertaker was more of a special attraction, not a long-term champion. I mean, you only could really do his Undertaker match, so he wouldn't have been able to have great title defences against a wide variety of opponents like Bret would. And then, so how would Bret fare in WCW? I feel he would have fared very well, I think. Obviously, in the Bill Watts era, Bill Watts like realistic style wrestling. I think Bret fit that bill. Obviously, but I don't think Bret would have been as successful in WCW as was in the WWF, because let's be honest, at the time Sting was the #1 babyface, and then Bret certainly wasn't going to beat him in popularity. So at best, I think Bret probably would have been US champion. He probably would have been in a similar position to Ricky Steamboat. I think him and Rick Rude could have had fucking phenomenal matches. Then how about this one for what if Bret Hart in 1992 wrestled a young man by the name of Stunning Steve Austin? Just throwing that one out there. Obviously, Austin and Bret had those epic matches in the WWF, but what if Bret Hart and Stunning Steve fought? So I think it would have been, yes, I think it would have been well, but I don't think it would have been as successful as he was in the WWF. Definitely not. So yeah, that's We Are Pro Wrestling's questions done. Next set of questions come from Owen Peterson. Would you consider 1992 the year that the WWF was at its most popular in the UK and Europe? I'll say, yeah, 92, 91, that period. Those two, that period, 91, 92. For 1992, I'll say yeah, because obviously they came over to do SummerSlam in Wembley and all that, sold out all those seats and all that. Everything was hot. I would say, especially in comparison to like the rest of the world. I mean, the WWF's popularity was declining in 91, 92, whereas over here its popularity was soaring and it's getting higher and higher. I would say it was probably hot as hell during the Attitude Era, like 1999, 2000, but that's really more of a reflection on how hot WWF was all over the world at the time. So yeah, I would say so. And what we got? Fourth in the 1992 UK Rampage event. Haven't seen the entire event in a long time. So this is an overall event I can't really remember being that special, but obviously earlier in the video I talked about the Macho Man Shawn Michaels title match. That was good. I believe Bret Hart and Rick Martel wrestled for the Intercontinental title, if I remember right. But everything else was average to mediocre to bad. I mean, Bulldog, I think the main event was British Bulldog and IRS, if I remember right, and that was just alright. There was an interesting little match on the show, I think Undertaker versus Sid Justice, years before the WrestleMania 13 match wrestled on this show. But apart from that, I can't really remember the rest of the card, to be honest with you. So apart from those 4 matches, the other matches I just can't remember, so it was probably just an alright show, if I imagine. Then should the 30-minute Iron Man match at Beach Blast between Ricky Steamboat and Rick Flair have had the US Championship on the line? Yeah, I don't really understand why it didn't, to be fair. I mean, Rude was a champion, he had a hot challenger in Steamboat. I honestly just don't know why they didn't just put the US title on the line. I thought that was a really strange decision. I mean, they did the same thing like way back at Starrcade 83. It was Roddy Piper and Greg Valentine dog collar match. For whatever reason, it wasn't for the US title. So yeah, should have had the US title on the line. And like I say, I just don't understand why it didn't, to be honest with you. I thought it was a pretty strange decision. Here we go. Since this feud is still carrying on from 1991, do you think Macho Man / Jake Roberts feud should have concluded in a steel cage? Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if for the argument's sake, say we're rebooking WrestleMania 8, I would have had Hogan Flair in the main event, then I would have done Savage and Jake the Snake in a steel cage match blow-off. But if I remember rightly, didn't they have the blow-off match in the Saturday night main event? The same one where it was Hogan and Sid versus Flair and The Undertaker. February 1992, I think. So they easily could have had that cage match blow-off on that show. I feel it would have been a perfect way to end the feud. I mean, Savage and Jake had just done all kinds of shit to each other, so lock them two in a cage and see what happens. I feel that would have been a perfect feud ender, yes. Then, thoughts on The Undertaker's babyface turn. I liked it. I just feel like, obviously, 1991 he was a heel. I think the character was just too cool to boo. I mean, he really had to turn babyface. I mean, if we remember Survivor Series 1991, he was noticeably getting cheered in certain spots against Hulk Hogan. I mean, this was the time before John Cena, before Roman Reigns, where booing the babyface became the norm. So that showed me fans are really getting into the Undertaker character, and the way they did it, if you remember, well, it was Savage was having a TV match, I think, or it might be I can't remember exactly when it was. Jake the Snake's plan was he was gonna hit Savage and Elizabeth with a chair when they came back through the curtain, only for the Undertaker to grab the steel chair off Jake the Snake Roberts, because Jake and the Undertaker had a heel alliance in late 1991, which was really cool actually. I thought they were a fantastic duo, to be fair. Jake the Snake and the Undertaker, brilliant. Then his face turn was cemented where Jake the Snake asked the Undertaker, whose side do you want? And the Undertaker said, not yours. So I thought it was a great babyface turn. I thought it was the absolute right move. Undertaker was getting popular. Obviously, a guy like The Undertaker, there was a lot of merchandise possibilities in that character, so they turned him babyface, and it was quite a success, wasn't it, really? I mean, had a 25-year career after that. Next set of questions come from Greedy Selfish 97. Thoughts of the Macho Man Ric Flair feud. Thought it was a great feud overall. I mean, it would have been amazing. Imagine if this feud happened in 1988 or something like that. Those would have been some of the greatest matches I ever. Say if they had a match at SummerSlam 88, that would have been a 5-star match. But it was great because obviously they didn't go with Hogan and Flair, so when Flair comes at the WWF, you're thinking dream matches, you think first dream match would be Hogan, then who would be just right after Hogan for Flair dream matches? And the answer would have to be Savage, wouldn't it, really? I mean, you feel like the peak of wrestling in the 80s, like, let's say the late 80s, you would say like the three hottest stars in the business were Hogan, Flair and Macho Man. I mean, now granted this was 1992 and both guys were in the early 40s now, I mean, but, so they weren't at the absolute best anymore, but they were still very, very capable workers. And loved the bit where Flair was claiming that Elizabeth was Ric Flair's before she was Macho Man's. I thought it was funny, Ric Flair go, Macho Man, she was mine before she was yours, woo! So that was funny. I was rubbing his nose in it. I thought build up in the WrestleMania 8 match was excellent. I really did like that WrestleMania 8 match. I thought that was a phenomenal match. One of the better WWF title matches in WrestleMania history. Even now, all these years later, I still think it's an awesome match. Then after that, it kind of transitioned to Savage versus Warrior with, if you remember the storyline, Ric Flair's manager, Mr. Perfect, was offering his services to Macho Man and Warrior, and then that became a plot for Flair and Perfect to destroy both Savage and Warrior, and then obviously Flair then beat Macho Man for the title. Then that then transitioned to a tag feud of what was supposed to be Flair and Razor Ramon versus the Ultimate Maniacs, Macho Man and Ultimate Warrior. And there's a question about this later on, so I'll talk about that more in long form in the future, later on. Then obviously that transitioned to Savage and Perfect versus Flair and Ramon Survivor Series. So I thought it was like, looking back, it wasn't like one of the best feuds of either man's career. I mean, when you think of Flair, you think of all these classic feuds of Steamboat, Dusty Rhodes, Harley Race, Sting and all that. Then when you think of Macho Man, you think of Savage versus Hogan, Savage versus Steamboat. Even Savage versus Jake I thought was a better feud than Savage and Flair, but and I even thought they had a pretty damn good feud in WCW in 1995. Maybe we'll talk about 1995 one day. And what have we got? Because in 1990, oh no, we're jumping the gun here. Who else would you have liked to see win the 1992 Royal Rumble? No one, to be honest. I feel Flair was the right choice. Flair was by far the best choice. I mean, did anyone really want to see Hulk Hogan win a third Royal Rumble in a row? I mean, not really. I suppose Macho Man, I'd possibly, but as a second option, maybe. But and then you got your guys like Sid and The Undertaker, but it would have been fine choices, but certainly no Flair's. I mean, I feel like that Royal Rumble was Ric Flair's night to shine. He drew number 3. He lasted nearly an hour in the Royal Rumble. Vintage Ric Flair. I mean, when you think you define the moments of Ric Flair's career, this has to be worse than the top 3. I mean, when you think of them, I always think of Flair beating Harley Race at Starrcade 83. The aging Ric Flair defeating Vader at Starrcade 93. Obviously, Ric Flair's retirement, wink wink, WrestleMania 24, but this one has to be right up there with them. I mean, yeah, for me there was really no other choice. It really had to be Flair, to be honest. And what have we got? Because in 1992 it'd be a comeback year for WCW. As an actual product, yes, but as like business wise, no, not really. I mean, look, so let's go for business wise. I mean, 1992 WCW didn't really make much progress in challenging the WWF, did they? I mean, 1991 it was seen as a distant second to the WWF. In 1992, exactly the same. I don't think business really improved at all. I mean, there might have been some slight improvements and stuff like that, but I don't think it was really that significant. As a product, I would say, yeah, definitely. I mean, 1991 was a pretty bad year for WCW overall, I would say. I mean, this was Jim Herd's reign of terror, and believe it or not, Jim Herd's probably the only person ever in wrestling to be dumber than Vince Russo. So, this is the guy who fired Ric Flair and all that controversial shit. The stupid gimmicks such as Big Josh and the Lumberjacks, and was it Ding Dongs? Ding Dongs might have been 90 actually, but that time frame. Then I feel like, obviously, especially when Bill Watts took over WCW, which we're going to get to in a second, I feel like the product improved significantly. Absolutely. So then obviously the pay-per-views significantly better in 1992 than in 1991, which I'll also get into. Which leads me to your next question. Overall thoughts on Bill Watts' tenure in WCW. I honestly think this is underrated as fuck by a lot of people. I mean, it often gets criticised for being outdated and all that sort of shit. And they've got a point, but I've really liked Bill Watts' tenure in WCW. I think it's Bill Watts, so he's one of those guys. I mean, a lot of Bill Watts' philosophies on wrestling, I'm totally on board with. I mean, Bill Watts, he likes wrestling to be realistic. He wants the fans to believe in his wrestling. He wants wrestling to seem real, and I'm totally on board with stuff like that. I mean, but I would say problem was this was 1992. I mean, Watts had been tremendously successful in his career running Mid-South territory in the 70s and early to mid 80s. Before selling out to Jim Crockett in 1987. Problem was, this was 1992 now. A lot had changed in those years. The problem was, not only was Bill Watts old school, Bill Watts is from the school that they burnt down before they built the old school. So, I mean, some of his philosophies, like dimming out the lights and darkening the arena, taking away the ring mats outside, making it illegal coming off the top rope. It just, problem was, it just made WCW look so regional, if that makes sense. It just made it look like a show from like 1979 in Oklahoma, where it was supposedly 1992 and they were trying to attract a worldwide audience. That being said though, the actual wrestling product was pretty awesome, to be honest. I mean, there's some great stuff in there, like Big Van Vader coming in and immediately becoming the world champion. Steiners versus Gordy and Williams. I mean, that, if you want to watch realistic looking matches, watch those matches. That is 4 men out there. Obviously, the Dangerous Alliance, Rick Rude and Ricky Steamboat, awesome rivalry. Young man by the name of Stunning Steve Austin, doing extremely well for himself. Cactus Jack, Brian Pillman, Justin Liger. So really phenomenal talent. And you look at the pay-per-views that year. I mean, you have Super Brawl. Actually, I think what may have taken over after Super Brawl, actually. But then it was obviously Wrestle War. That was a good show overall. Beach Blast, like I said before, was tremendous. I thought the Great American Bash was a good, not a great show. Slightly overrated. And what else? Oh, okay. The Halloween Havoc was Starrcade had some pretty good stuff on there, so I'm a fan of the Bill Watts era in WCW. And if you want to see any pre-Monday Night Wars WCW, like after Turner bought the company until like the hot era of 1996, 1997, I'd probably suggest checking out a lot of this WCW 1992 stuff. I mean, the talent roster is pretty tremendous looking back now. I mean, a lot of the guys that were around in WCW in that era are now in the WWE Hall of Fame, or if they're not, they're obviously going to be in the WWE Hall of Fame someday. So, yeah, I would say definitely check some of the pay-per-views and the clashes out and all that. Then what do we have here? Thoughts on Eastern Championship Wrestling in brackets predecessor to Extreme Championship Wrestling that formed in mid-1992. I'm going to have to be honest here. I've never seen any Eastern Championship Wrestling 1992 stuff, so can't really answer that question, to be honest. I mean, I haven't seen the most ECW I saw was like the era of the Extreme Championship Wrestling era, from probably the time Shane Douglas threw down the NWA title. I think that's when my knowledge of ECW really starts. So I'm going to have to be honest, I have not seen a single show from Eastern Championship Wrestling in 1992. It had to have been alright though, because survived into 1993 and then finally morphed into Extreme Championship Wrestling in 1994. So obviously a lot of promotions around that time died, so it must have done alright for itself. There we got next set of questions. Jericholic 8704. Whose career benefited more from the Survivor Series 1992 main event? Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart, or was it the benefit equal between the two of them? I would say both of them really. I mean, obviously that was Bret Hart's first pay-per-view main event as the champion, so it was like, so the pressure was on him, because you think Bret Hart back then, when Bret Hart took the title, it was totally different to a Hulk Hogan or Ultimate Warrior. I mean, Bret Hart didn't have a great look, he wasn't super muscular, he didn't have great promo skills, he wasn't super charismatic. Bret Hart's strong point was his wrestling. He was a great wrestler. So that's the sort of champion Bret's going to be, a technical wrestling champion. It's kind of like the pressure's on him to deliver on that, isn't it, really? So his first pay-per-view title defense, he had to really knock it out of the park and have an awesome match, which he did. And then that led him to have a 5-year main event career with the WWF. And for Shawn Michaels, although Shawn Michaels was young in his career, and wouldn't become a true main eventer for another 3 years or so. And that early exposure helped him, I think. Just being in a pay-per-view main event for the WWF Championship really boosted his credibility. I mean, Shawn had just become the Intercontinental Champion at the time, and then going into 1993, Shawn was going to get relied on more and more and more. So I think it showed Vince that Shawn could hang in a main event match, which is what he needed at the time. So I would say the benefit of both of them. Do you think Bret Hart should have won his first title at a pay-per-view? I would say, in a perfect world, yes. But you've got to remember, this was 1992 and there were only 4 pay-per-views a year. Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series. And TV, for the most part, was squash matches like Styles versus the Jobber. So this was before Raw as well. Saturday night main events had phased out at this point. I mean, I'm pretty sure there was only 2 Saturday Night main events in all of 1992, if I remember right. One in February, and then the last one in, must have been October, because Bret was a champion, or it might have been early November, because Bret was a champion wrestling Papa Shango on that show, if I remember right. But not like now, where there's, fuck me, like 20 pay-per-views a year nowadays. So if it was like in nowadays, there's no real excuse to have title switches on TV or house shows. I mean, you have enough fucking pay-per-views. I mean, it's getting now to the point where we're having a pay-per-view every 2 weeks. So with that being said, do you have Bret and Flair Survivor Series and have Bret win it there? But the problem was they're already building to that tag match with Flair and Razor in what turned out to be Savage and Perfect, but was supposed to be Warrior and Savage. Obviously, SummerSlam 1992, he was defending the Intercontinental title. WrestleMania 8, he was winning the Intercontinental title. So the only pay-per-view you could have done it was a Survivor Series. And like I say, there was no Raw hadn't started yet, and squash matches was what the main name of the game TV. Now, I just kind of disappointed he had his first title win in a house show, looking back. I mean, he's a real champ. The sad thing is, I remember that time, I remember watching WWF on whatever, Saturday, Sunday morning, or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden, Bret Hart was announced as a WWF champion. I was like, what the? Well, I didn't swear because I was a kid, but yeah, I was just so surprised to see Bret as a champion. And I bet you I didn't watch that match in full till about, I want to say like 2006, 2007 or something like that. I'd never seen the full Bret and Flair match for about nearly 15 years after it happened, believe it or not. So it would have been perfect if he'd won a title on the pay-per-view, but like I say, there was only 4 back then, so, and obviously he was Intercontinental champion for 2 of them. Wasn't on the 1992 Royal Rumble, so it was only Survivor Series. Now here's a good one. Do you think Bret's run of the IC title is more memorable than his first WWF title run in 1992? I do actually, yeah. I mean, not that his WWF title run was bad. I mean, wasn't great, but for a first title reign, it wasn't so bad. Obviously his more memorable title run is his 1994 one, which maybe we'll talk about one day, but there's 2 big reasons why. I mean, first off, he won the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 8 over a legend like Roddy Piper, a legend in the WWF. I mean, Piper didn't lose many matches in his career, especially clean. Don't recall many Piper clean losses in the WWF in his career. I mean, that's very, very seldom. And then Bret got such a huge honour by beating, even in 1992, I think Roddy Piper was a legend. Then obviously, his reign's memorable for the Intercontinental title match with the British Bulldog at SummerSlam 1992. So yeah, I would definitely say so. Then we got, next question. Honour of Sediata. Force on Ron Simmons' title reign. I don't know what the kind of worms here, but I'm just going to be honest. I'm not a fan of that Ron Simmons title reign. No. Just feel that he wasn't world title material. He's a mid-carder holding the world title. I don't really... I feel like the only reason he won it was because he wanted a black champion. And that's the only reason he won it, because he's black. And Bill Watts wanted a black world champion. I will admit though, the moment when he won the title was cool. And obviously if you are African American, it's probably a special moment for you. But for me, not really. Yeah, I mean, at the time, obviously, like, he was way behind the likes of Sting, the likes of Rude, even Vader. His reign just wasn't very good. It was okay at best, but in fairness to Simmons, he wasn't really given good material. His big pay-per-view title defense against Halloween Havoc was against the fucking Barbarian. I mean, really? And I think he had like a title defense against Cactus Jack on one of the clashes as well. So yeah, I just feel like Simmons was good performer, decent on the mic, a great mid-carder, but he just wasn't a main event world champion material in my opinion. and I feel like his world title reign was mediocre at best. And it was really for that reason, to get a first black world champion, and Simmons just happened to be there. Then was 1992 a bigger breakout year for Bret Hart or Vader? I would say Bret Hart, because like I think Vader was already something of he was already a big star in Japan and was somewhat well known before. Whereas you look at Bret, I mean, you look at Bret at the start of the year. Look at the start in 1992. How many people do you honestly think would have thought, you know what, at the end of this year, Bret Hart's going to be the world champion? I bet nobody was saying that. I mean, because you look at how much the landscape changed in the WWF in the course of a year. Bret started out the year as the Intercontinental Champion, but he was probably, probably number at least, just an upper mid card, popular upper mid card babyface. I mean, you had Hogan, you had Savage, you had Piper, Sid was so Bret was probably at best number 5 babyface in the company. Then, due to a combination of guys leaving, veterans being phased out, steroid scandal meaning Vince needed to go with smaller wrestlers, Bret got his opportunity and ended the year as a world champion. So I'll definitely go with Bret. And then who was a better performer in 1992? Bret Hart or Sting? Kind of answered this one before, and did the top 5 wrestlers of the year. So Bret Hart. And then this is a good one, and he's actually completely right. How do you about 1992 having both the best Royal Rumble and the best War Games? Yeah, that's just an awesome little stat for 1992, isn't it? I mean, for me, even now, 1992 Royal Rumble is still the greatest Royal Rumble match of all time, an absolute epic. And then the War Games from Wrestle War 1992, Sting Squadron versus Dangerous Alliance. I also agree, the best War Games ever. Another 5-star match, so I think that's awesome. Do you think that's a really cool thing that the same year had the best Rumble and the best War Games? And he goes, and then what have we got? How long do you think Hulkamania would have been without the steroid scandal? I think he probably still would have been the top guy throughout 1992, probably. I imagine if this didn't happen and he faced Flair at WrestleMania, beat Flair, have another run as world champion, probably for most of the year. And going to be honest, without Hogan, Bret probably wouldn't have got the title, to be honest with you. He was definitely right place at the right time. But at the same time, I do feel like probably going to 93, 94, Hogan would have scaled back. I mean, he turned 40 in 1993, and he'd been on top since 1984. So I just feel like, and obviously he was doing more acting stuff at the time. He had kids now, so I feel like he would have probably stepped into a more of a part-time role as 1993, 1994 rolled around, pretty much like John Cena is now. And obviously I feel like Hulkamania, I feel like you could only do that role for so long. I mean, God knows how stale John Cena got eventually. I think Hogan, he was starting to get stale in 1991, I feel. Feel like his last big thing was a Sergeant Slaughter feud. Then after that, he was kind of getting stale. So I feel eventually that bubble would have burst, like 93, 94, once the business became more fast-paced and all that. So I feel like he probably would have been champion for most of 1992, possibly even in 1993 as well. And who knows, maybe WrestleMania 9 it would have been Hogan and Yokozuna maybe. Then Hogan puts over the new monster heel. Then maybe he'll go to like a part-time role. And obviously like Lex Luger and that would have came in and that. Sid would have still been around, so Vince could have still had his big muscled up baby faces. So I'll probably say about a year or so more, and then probably phase out after that. Then we got next set of questions. Prince of Strong Style 9v2, that's version 2. What are your memories of watching SummerSlam 1992? Yeah, I can't really remember that well. I mean, it was an afternoon, like a Wednesday afternoon or something like that. I mean, this is the first pay-per-view I saw, And like I said before, it's not like now where you get a pay-per-view every 2 weeks or so. So I've been a wrestling fan probably about 3 months at this point. I remember pretty much all the build-up for this, such as the Bret and Davey Boy stuff, the Warrior Savage, Mr. Perfect, Undertaker Kamala feud, stuff like that. So very excited to see these matches, because obviously remember at the time as well, obviously most of what I'd seen has been television squash matches and all that, so this was a chance to see all like the stars versus the stars on a pay-per-view, so that was really cool. And one daft thing I remember, my brother was a baby at the time and he was watching it in his high chair. Poor little bastard. Only a few months old and he was already being made to watch wrestling. Poor kid. But yeah, it was a cool time then. Bret Hart and Davey Boy Smith both got great promos. Well, I don't know about Davey Boy, but yeah. And on them, the British Bulldog is going to win kid promos. Who had the best one? And yes, this is a serious question, mainly for some laughs. So when you talk about the British Bulldog's going to win promo, I think you're referring to this. Yeah, I don't know how that came out on the video, but yeah, there was some fucking dopey kid that, yeah, because before the show they went through the, like, showed people outside the arena and that, and they went to this fucking dopey little kid and went, who goes, the British Bulldog's gonna win, whether he wants to or not. I mean, what? Why would he not want to win? You know, whether he wants to or not. What the fuck does that even mean? So if he doesn't want to win, he's gonna win anyway. But right, to be fair, that's one of the classic. I still remember that. That's just fucking hilarious. And I always thought it would have been, you only did the UK Championship shows. Would it be funny if they got some kid in the crowd and goes, Tyler Bates gonna win whether he wants to or not. That'd be hilarious. But out of those, I think Davey Boy's promo was decent. I think I'm going to be biased here, but I think Bret's promo knocked it out the park. I mean, Bret gets knocked at having poor mic skills and all that, but do I think that was actually one of the best promos of his entire career? I really do. You should definitely go back and check it out if you haven't seen it before. Then, what are your thoughts on Bret's comments pertaining to SummerSlam 1992 and the fact was Davey Boy was, sarcastic quotation marks, supposedly injured, in brackets Bret's word not mine. So, what happened was, Davey Boy suffered a staph infection supposedly according to Bret, and was off for like 6 weeks before SummerSlam. But at the same time, this was right around the time that Davey Boy's drug addiction was really getting bad, So Bret feels like Davey wasn't as hurt as he made out to be, and he was off with his drug problems. Because the night before, when Davey Boy flew into England, Bret sensed something was up, and then Davey Boy finally fessed up that he'd been smoking crack for weeks with Jim Neidhart, and now he was terrified. So, and I think there was a story that Davey Boy was high as fuck on the flight coming to England as well. So Bret feels like the staph infection was a convenient excuse, and Davey Boy was really just fucked up on drugs and all that sort of thing. So if that's what Bret feels, I'm sure Bret knew more about the situation than any of us. I mean, being close to Davey Boy and all that, brothers-in-laws and stuff like that, and being around him during that weekend of SummerSlam. I mean, Bret had been around the business a long time. I'm pretty sure he had a good idea when someone was high on drugs. So I'm not going to say Bret's wrong about that. And with the initial viewing of Bret Dave that made it your favourite match of all time, yeah, probably. I'd probably say so. Obviously, I can't say that for sure because it happened 25 years ago and I can't remember everything. But I think so. Yeah, I really do. I mean, probably watching that match at that time was probably what cemented me as a wrestling fan, I would say. I mean, I was a keen wrestling fan, obviously, but this was the first big pay-per-view I watched, and that was like the first epic match I'd ever seen, probably. And yeah, so I'd probably say, with that being the first pay-per-view I ever watched and all that, and it's watching it as a kid, I would probably say, yeah, I'd probably say that's probably correct. And how interesting is it? Main event was more of a crowning achievement for Brett than it was for Davey. Very interesting, because on paper, this is Davey Boy Smith coming back to England to challenge Brett for the Intercontinental title in the main event. Davey Boy going over, so that would lead one to conclude this was Davey Boy's crown achievement in the WWF and he was going to go on to bigger things. But obviously at the same time, Vince was looking for a new face of the company, and obviously Brett had put on such an epic. I'll go into detail another time, probably when I do match retrospectives and I end up doing this match. But Bret Hart literally carried that match literally carried Davey Boy through that match, and then obviously that epic performance from Bret Hart, Vince saw that and thought, wow, Bret, he can be the world champion now. And I imagine that is probably what swayed Vince's decision to go with Bret. And it was about 6 weeks later, Bret was a WWF champion. Then by early November, Davey Boy was gone for the company. So it's an awesome thing how Bret took that opportunity, grabbed it with both hands, and then became a main eventer as a result of that. And then we got the man that was a Daniel, and he's got one question: if Flair never jumped ship with the WWF, do you think should have been the what do you think should have been the WrestleMania 8 main event? So, good question. I mean, initially I was thinking about this, and I first thought it was Hogan versus the Undertaker, but then I got thinking, if you do this realistically, let's be honest, there's no way Hogan loses to the Undertaker, is he really, at WrestleMania? So if that happened, then the streak would be over at 1-0, and that epic 21-0 streak never happened. So really, if Flair wasn't there and it wasn't going to be Flair and Hogan, I really had no problem with it being Hogan and Sid. From a storyline standpoint, of course, I mean, as far as the match goes, yeah, it sucked and all that, but the storyline made sense for it to be that, so I'd probably say I had no particular qualms about it being Hogan Sid had it not been for Flair. I mean, not that Hogan Sid was a bad option to main event WrestleMania, it's just Hogan Flair was the match. Or there's a possible alternative. I mean, this is assuming this could be done. You possibly bring back the Warrior earlier, say like right after the Royal Rumble or something, and then do Hogan Warrior 2 for the world title in the main event of WrestleMania, and the rematch from WrestleMania 6. That could also be an option. And then here we are, right at the end now. Final set of questions coming from Michael Shepardson, and not a single question has annoyed me. So good lad. Unlike the last time. But what have we got? If SummerSlam 1992 happened when you were older, about mid-20s, would you have gone through it? About mid-20s? You cheeky bastard. I'm still a young man. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, say if I was adult and it happened, oh God, I'd be there. I'd be absolutely there. I'd be fucking wicked. I'd probably make a fucking weekend of it and all. Just go down London, have a weekend on the sesh. You know what I'm on about, boys. Probably get pissed on the train on the way there. Stay in a hotel for 2 nights, and go. Obviously, if you did this now, like, there'd probably be a fan fest and all that to go to. So I'd be going to that. There'd be a takeover. I'd probably go to that. So it'd be pretty sweet. It'd be probably one of the best weekends of my life if it ever materialised. Then what do we have? Top 5 moments in 1992. So number 5, obviously Ron Simmons beating Vader for the world title in WCW and become the first African American world champion. Gotta put that at number 5. Obviously, if I was black and African American, I'd probably rate it higher, but I'm not, so it only gets number 5. And this next one's going to surprise the hell out of you, but it's only number 4, and that's Bret Hart winning the world title for the first time. And again, the only reason it's not high is because it happened on a house show, really out of nowhere. There was no real build up to it. Say if it happened on a big pay-per-view or something like that, it would probably be number 1, but happened on a house show, so it is number 5. 4. But so ignore that. And then we got number 3 has to be Shawn Michaels turning heel on Marty Jannetty in the barbershop. This happened in January, right before the Royal Rumble. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about this. You've probably seen it. It's one of the all-time great WWE heel turns in the barbershop. Brutus the Barber UK's talk show. Michaels and Jannetty were on that. Shawn Michaels super kicks Marty Jannetty. Then that coward Marty Jannetty jumps through the barbershop window to get away from Shawn Michaels. Now, some people might tell you that Shawn threw Marty through the window, but they're lying. Marty jumped through. And then number 2, Ric Flair winning the WWF Championship at the Royal Rumble 1992. What a fucking classic moment. That whole match really counts as a moment. I mean, Flair drawing number 3, going the hour, taking punishment from everyone. Vintage classic Ric Flair performance. Then culminates in winning the WWF Championship for the first time. And of course, number 1, the British Bulldog Bret Hart SummerSlam main event in Wembley. Davey Boy beating Bret for the Intercontinental title in front of his home country fans, 80,000 fans. One of the greatest matches of all time. So that one really. Then we got top 5 wrestlers in 1992, which I already answered, and answers were Savage, Flair, Rude, Sting, Bret. And the last question is top 5 matches of 1992. So good question. Now number 5, and I think this is a reflection of how good the rest of the matches were. This is only number 5. 30-minute Iron Man match, Beach Blast, Ricky Steamboat versus Rick Rude. Great match. Awesome match here, I mean, some great selling on display. Just fan-fucking-tastic, I mean. Steamboat was truly one of the best. Rude is great as well, 2 Hall of Famers. Then number 4, Brian Pillman, Jushin Liger from Super Brawl. Discussed that in detail earlier on in the video, but absolute must-see match. Number 3, and this just shows how good the other 2, this one is number 3, and that Wrestle War 1992 War Games, Sting Squadron versus Dangerous Alliance. Going to be match review on this one eventually, because that one blew away the War Games poll I did recently. So on July the 4th, that's going to be a big match retrospective. But so it was Sting, Nikita Koloff, Ricky Steamboat, Barry Windham, Dustin Rhodes against Dangerous Alliance of Rick Rude, Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko, Bobby Eaton, Stone and Steve Austin. Amazing, brutal match. Then number 2, the 1992 Royal Rumble. Speaks for itself. Amazing match. The greatest Royal Rumble match of all time. And of course, number 1, what else was it going to be? Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog from SummerSlam 1992. One of the greatest matches of all time. Absolute legendary classic match. Has to be seen by everybody. So yeah, that's it, guys. That's a video out of the way. Not sure when the next one's going to be, but when it is, I'll just make the announcement, and then obviously you guys send the questions, and that's how it works. So thanks for all the questions, guys, and I'm out for now, and peace.